Have you ever had that strange feeling like you're living a life that doesn't really belong to you? As if you're just playing a role in a story someone else wrote, your parents, teachers, friends, or even society at large? And deep down, there's this quiet voice screaming that something doesn't add up. You get up every morning, wear the same emotional mask, handle your responsibilities, smile at the right times, interact with others like everything's perfectly fine. But then, in those quiet moments, a question slips through the cracks. Who am I, really? Carl Jung believed that this feeling of disconnection isn't just some random existential crisis. He thought it was a symptom, a red flag waving from deep within your psyche. According to Jung, most people go through life never actually meeting their true selves. Instead, they adopt roles. They live out identities crafted by societal expectations. And the scariest part? Many people think that's all life has to offer. They live and die without ever getting to know their own soul. So here's the real question. Is this happening to you? What you think of as yourself, your personality, your goals, your opinions, how much of that is actually yours? And how much of it was planted there by other people? From the moment we're born, we're trained, sometimes subtly, sometimes aggressively, to fit in, to be likable, to avoid conflict, to hide the messy or inconvenient parts of ourselves in exchange for approval. We all build a version of ourselves that the world will accept. Jung called this version the persona. It's like a mask we wear to protect ourselves. And the more we wear it, the more we forget that it's a mask at all. Eventually, we get so used to it that we start to think it is who we are. But Jung warned that living cut off from your real self comes at a steep cost. It shows up as anxiety, restlessness, dissatisfaction, a gnawing feeling that something's off, even if everything looks good on the outside. Have you ever hit a goal, gotten the praise, checked the boxes, and still felt hollow inside? Like something important was missing, but you couldn't put your finger on it? That's because what you're truly searching for isn't out there. It's not in the next relationship, the next job, the next follower milestone. It's in here, buried under layers of programming, fear, and the need to be accepted. So now comes the hard question. Are you ready to dig? Because the journey to uncover your true self isn't easy. It's not about just thinking positive or repeating affirmations. It's a psychological excavation. It requires you to confront parts of yourself that you've pushed away, ignored, or buried over the years. But it's also the only way to really feel alive. This is what Jung called the process of individuation, the path to becoming whole, to bringing every part of yourself into harmony and finally living according to your true essence. If that resonates with you, then let's take this step together. Let's rewind a bit, back to childhood. At some point, you learned certain behaviors were rewarded, and others not so much. Maybe you were taught to always be polite, never raise your voice, suppress your anger, and go out of your way to make others comfortable. Or maybe you were told to toughen up, hide your vulnerabilities, and always appear confident, even when you were drowning in self-doubt. Unknowingly, you began crafting an identity that wasn't truly yours. You became a reflection of what the world wanted to see. That's the persona. It's the face you put on for the outside world, carefully constructed to gain acceptance and avoid rejection. And listen, having a persona isn't necessarily a bad thing. We all need one. It helps us navigate social situations and relationships. It's what lets you behave differently at work than you do with close friends. It's what helps you keep things civil at the family dinner table. But the problem starts when we forget that the persona is just a role. When we get so caught up in playing that role that we start to believe it's the full picture of who we are. So take a moment, really ask yourself, how many times have you said something just to fit in? How often have you laughed when you didn't think something was funny or smiled when you were really falling apart inside? That's the persona at work. And when it takes over your life, you start living like a character in someone else's story. You lose touch with what you actually think, feel, and want. You become a projection instead of a person. And here's the kicker. The persona might bring social acceptance, even admiration, but it can never bring fulfillment. It can never make you feel truly known, truly seen, because it's not really you. The longer you cling to that mask, the further you drift from your core self. So if the persona isn't the real you, then who is? To answer that, we have to look at what lies behind the mask, the parts of you that didn't make the cut, the sides of yourself that you were told to hide. Jung called this the shadow, and this, right here, is where the real work begins. But I'll warn you, the shadow isn't easy to face. If the persona is the mask you show the world, the shadow is everything you've hidden to avoid being judged or rejected. But here's the thing most people don't realize. What you repress doesn't just go away. It doesn't disappear. It festers. It takes root in your unconscious and starts pulling strings behind the scenes, affecting your emotions, your decisions, even your relationships. Jung described the shadow as the collection of all the parts of yourself you've pushed away over the years. Forbidden desires, bottled up anger, insecurities you won't admit, childhood wounds. And here's the surprising part. Many of these parts aren't bad at all. They were just labeled as unacceptable by someone else. Maybe you were a naturally curious kid, but someone told you to stop asking questions, so you learned to stay quiet. Maybe you felt deeply, but were told that showing emotion was weak, so you shut down. Maybe you were expressive and passionate, but someone mocked you, so you learned to dial it back. All of those denied pieces, they don't vanish. They go underground, into your shadow, waiting, and they will come out. Ever had a random outburst of anger that didn't make sense, or felt envy you didn't want to admit, or reacted way too strongly to some small criticism? That's your shadow at work. When we don't confront it consciously, it finds other, often destructive ways to show itself. But here's the truth that most people never hear. The shadow isn't your enemy. It's not a curse. It's actually the key to unlocking your authenticity. Inside your shadow are your hidden strengths, your creativity, your emotional depth, your power. You can't be whole until you make peace with this part of you. And that means you have to stop running from it. You have to go inward and face what's been buried. But how? That's where Jung's concept of the self comes in, the truest, deepest version of you. And that's exactly what we're going to explore next. Now, if the persona is the version of you the world sees, the shadow is everything you've tried to hide, and the self is who you are beyond all of that, then what stands in the way of becoming that full, authentic self? Fear. And not just any fear. It's the kind that hides beneath your routines, your successes, and your carefully crafted image. See, most people never confront this fear. Why? Because doing so means they have to admit that parts of their life, their choices, maybe even their identity, weren't truly theirs. That can be terrifying. But Carl Jung was clear. If you don't face these buried parts of yourself, they don't just go away. They rule your life from the shadows. And they will keep doing so until you bring them into the light. Let me ask you something. Have you ever found yourself sabotaging your own success? Or repeating patterns in relationships that hurt you? Maybe you've lashed out at someone and then wondered, where did that even come from? That's the unconscious at work. That's your shadow trying to speak. But here's the hopeful part. The more you understand the hidden forces within you, the more power you gain over your own life. Jung didn't believe that the unconscious should be feared. He believed it should be understood. Because once you begin that understanding, something remarkable happens. You begin to integrate those hidden parts, and with that integration comes healing, confidence, and a deep sense of personal truth. This whole process is what Jung called individuation. It's not about becoming someone else, it's about becoming yourself, fully, completely. Not just the version that fits in, not just the version that others approve of, but the version that is real. Now, to get there, we have to go even deeper, into something Jung called the collective unconscious. You see, it's not just our personal experiences that shape who we are. According to Jung, there's a whole layer beneath that, a shared psychological foundation built into all human beings. That's where archetypes come from. Archetypes are like ancient blueprints of the human experience. They're not specific people or stories, but rather patterns, symbols, and characters that show up everywhere. In myths, in religions, in your dreams, and even in your everyday thoughts. Ever feel inspired by a heroic story or deeply moved by a wise mentor? That's not random. That's an archetype activating something deep inside you. Let's break this down. There's the hero, the part of you that wants to overcome, to fight, to transform. There's the caregiver who finds purpose in serving others. The rebel who challenges authority. The lover who seeks deep emotional connection. the sage who searches for truth and wisdom. Now here's where things get interesting. Most people unconsciously over-identify with just one or two archetypes. Maybe you've always seen yourself as the strong one, the dependable one, the achiever. That sounds admirable, but what if that's keeping you from showing vulnerability? Or maybe you've always been the helper, but have neglected your own needs in the process. When we ignore certain archetypes in ourselves, those parts don't disappear. They wait, and when they finally show up, usually during a crisis, we don't know how to handle them. It feels chaotic, overwhelming, like life is spinning out of control. That's why part of individuation is not just recognizing your dominant archetypes, but integrating the others. That doesn't mean becoming someone else. It means becoming more of yourself, balancing the parts that have always been there but were left in the shadows. And one of the best ways to start seeing these hidden parts? Your dreams. Jung saw dreams as direct messages from the unconscious. Not random nonsense, but symbolic stories your deeper self is trying to tell you. That nightmare you had where you were being chased, that could be a part of yourself you're avoiding. That recurring dream where you're searching for something and never quite finding it, that could be your psyche urging you to explore your true purpose. Dreams often feature archetypes. A mysterious old man might represent the sage. A child might represent your own innocence or potential. A monster might be your shadow taking form. Jung said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." And that's exactly what we're doing on this journey, waking up to who you really are. But there's something you need to understand. Ignoring this process, resisting individuation, comes at a cost. It's not harmless. It's not neutral. The cost is your happiness, your peace, your sense of meaning. When you don't listen to your inner self, your unconscious will find ways to get your attention. It might show up as anxiety you can't explain, or a deep restlessness. You might have everything society says you should want, a career, a relationship, financial security, but still feel empty, like something essential is missing. That's the consequence of non-individuation. People who refuse this inner work often find themselves stuck in cycles. They repeat the same toxic relationships. They chase goals that don't fulfill them. They numb their discontent with distractions, scrolling, shopping, working, overachieving. But nothing works for long, because the problem isn't out there, it's in here. And if that inner tension is ignored for too long, it starts to break through in more serious ways. Burnout, breakdowns, even physical illness. The mind and body are deeply connected. What you avoid psychologically often surfaces physiologically. This is why Jung believed individuation wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. So what does it look like when someone does begin this process? They become more honest with themselves and with others. They stop pretending. They begin to notice the masks they've worn and start removing them. They revisit past wounds not to dwell in them, but to understand them and finally move forward. They embrace their complexity. They realize it's okay to be strong and sensitive, to lead and need help, to be both light and shadow. And that right there is where transformation begins. Now, none of this means your life will suddenly become easy. The journey of self-discovery is not a straight line. It's not comfortable, but what it is real. And when you start living from that place of authenticity, everything changes. Your relationships become deeper. Your choices become clearer. Your sense of peace becomes stronger. Because now you're living from within, not just reacting to everything out there. So you've faced the persona. You've met your shadow. You've felt the pull of the archetypes and caught glimpses of your deeper self. Maybe by now, you've even started to recognize patterns in your own life that suddenly make sense in a way they never did before. Good, because now we get to the heart of it. What happens when someone truly embraces their individuation? First, understand this. Individuation isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. And that difference matters. A perfect person is flawless, polished, always in control, an illusion. But a whole person? They are grounded, honest, integrated. They have accepted their contradictions, their flaws, their wounds, and because of that, they radiate something rare, presence. Think of someone in your life who doesn't pretend, who listens deeply, who seems calm in chaos, who can admit when they're wrong, but also speak the truth without fear. That person isn't acting, they're being. That's the self in action. You don't need to be enlightened to feel this shift. It happens in everyday ways. You stop reacting to triggers the way you used to. You pause before making choices, not out of fear, but out of clarity. You start recognizing when a voice in your head isn't your own, but maybe a parent, a teacher, a system. And you ask, do I really believe this? That question alone is revolutionary. But the individuation journey doesn't just stop with inner clarity. It often leads to something Jung called a spiritual awakening. Now, don't get thrown off by that term. This isn't about religion necessarily. It's about connection. Jung saw the self not just as your psychological center, but as your spiritual one too. He believed that to become whole, you must connect with something greater than your ego. A deeper intelligence, a source, a divine order, however you want to name it. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he also said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." This awakening often brings a new sense of purpose. Not a job, not a title, but a calling, a pull towards something meaningful. You stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "What is asking to be lived through me?" That shift can be subtle or dramatic. Some people quit careers that no longer align with them. Others change how they parent, how they love, how they lead. But in every case, the change comes not from pressure, but from alignment. And here's the part most people miss. When one person commits to this work, it ripples outward. Your healing affects others. Your honesty gives others permission to be honest. Your wholeness creates space for others to explore their own. Jung believed that true individuation serves not only the self, but the collective. The more individuals who face their shadows, who integrate their contradictions, who awaken to their deeper nature, the more sane, humane, and compassionate our world becomes. Because let's face it, most of what's wrong with the world isn't caused by bad people. It's caused by unconscious people. People ruled by fear, by trauma, by old patterns they've never examined. People who project their shadow onto others instead of owning it. People who are asleep to their deeper nature. But what if you could be awake? What if your life could be a mirror, not of survival, but of truth? Now here's the truth. This journey isn't fast. It's not linear. There's no checklist. It's a spiral. Some days you'll feel free, other days you'll feel lost again. That's normal. Healing isn't a destination, it's a relationship. So what can you do? Start small. Pay attention to your dreams. Write them down. What symbols appear again and again? Watch your triggers. What sets you off emotionally? That's gold, because that's the shadow showing its face. Question your patterns. Are you living your values or someone else's? And most importantly, create stillness. In stillness, the unconscious speaks, not in noise, not in distraction, in silence. Because beneath all the layers, beneath the persona, the shadow, the fear, is something quiet and ancient and true. It is yourself, and it's been waiting for you to return. So now, it's your turn. You can keep living from the surface, or you can go within. Just know this. The more you reclaim your wholeness, the more fully you live. And that, in the end, is the deepest freedom any human being can know. If this journey spoke to you, and you want more depth, more guidance, more practical tools, let me know. I can help you design a roadmap for your own individuation. Shadow work prompts, dream journaling practices, active imagination exercises, archetype mapping. You don't have to walk this path alone, but only you can take the first step.